Promo code 2222.
Back on the show, all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. You're listening to Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com, but I'm thrilled to be joined by the man that the Food Network has called America's top mixologist. Brian Van Flandern is joining us here on Get Down to Business. Brian, we're sticking to this foodie theme, but you're sort of taking us to the other end of the spectrum from food to cocktails. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, so Brian, you are, as we mentioned, you've been called America's top mixologist, but you've sort of worked your way there. I believe that your plan was actually to become an actor and pursue an acting career. How did you make the leap from that to spending your time teaching and partnering with so many fantastic brands and companies in building mixology programs?
Well, it was a bizarre set of circumstances. I finally decided to get out of the customer service industry, out of the restaurant game, out of the bartending biz, and go back to school, finish up my degree. I had like 6 years of college credits out there, and I finally finished that up, and get out of the acting game, too, because I thought, I wanted a steady job. And bottom line was I took one last restaurant job, just one last one, to survive my college degree. And wouldn't you know, that restaurant was Per Se with Chef Thomas Keller. And when we opened that up, it opened up to Michelin 3-star, Mobile 5-star, New York Times 4-star. It was the highest, it was ranked the number one new restaurant in the world in 2004 when we opened it. And it was just a completely life-transforming experience. It was just opened my eyes. And I was just trying to keep my job, but I was trying to create cocktails that would do the amazing food coming out of the kitchen justice. And all of a sudden, the New York Times, the Daily Telegraph, London, people start writing about my cocktail. Like, what's going on here? And to your original point, you talk about being foodie. If you haven't been paying attention, the cocktail revolution, we're in the midst of a new golden age of the cocktail that we haven't seen since before 1920. And the best bartenders in the world are emulating the great chefs. We're sourcing farm-to-table ingredients, balancing the acids and sugars, reducing the ethanol, and creating food-friendly cocktails. It is a burgeoning, an emerging culinary art form.
And I know, Brian, you are not only an expert, and certainly we'll talk about sort of your masterpiece recipes, and I know you've created a number of original recipes on your own. But we were just having an earlier conversation with Klein, a award-winning author on the food scene around the world. I'm curious, Brian, sort of continuing that theme. You've traveled all over, and I know that your cocktails are served in over 40 countries around the world. In fact, you and I actually met while traveling around the world because of your partnership with the luxury cruise line Seabourn. But how different is the cocktail scene here in the United States, around the world? And then I'm also curious, we're broadcasting here in Chicago, but you're on the East Coast. You're in the New York metro area. What sort of analysis do you have on the differences as you've traveled around the country as well?
Well, again, good question. The cocktail revolution, we can say very clearly, started either in New York or London. Probably, the history will decide who was the first one to really kick it in overdrive. But those two cities really started this revolution, and since then, it has spread like wildfire. What started with a dozen of us became 10 dozen, became 100 dozen, and now it's tens upon thousands of bartenders all around the world. Every major city and most minor ones sport at least one or more craft cocktail bars, and it's all happened in the last 15 to 20 years. It's really an exciting time in the spirits industry and to be a bartender, a professional barman. So to answer your question, incredible stuff going on in Germany, in Spain, certainly in Australia, both Sydney and Melbourne, and other cities. Tokyo has gotten on board. Even France was a link to the game. Last year, one of their barmen, a bar woman, I should say, just won Diageo World Class. So, and of course, in the United States, San Fran, Chicago, Miami, and it's really filtered down. A couple of years ago, I had a client in I think it was Edwardsville, south of Chicago, and just north of St. Louis. Who knew? But they're getting on board with craft cocktails. Same with the state of Ohio, Illinois. Everyone across the country. If you're not making craft cocktails, you're behind the curve. You're losing out on massive revenue opportunities.
So, Brian, do you believe it's possible for a small bar, small restaurant to compete with the large chains? I know that you have a very strong relationship with Thomas Keller, having opened one of those restaurants, and a lot of the larger chains they have more capacity for launching professional mixology programs that can be streamlined with an image, with a brand across their many locations. What about the small location in Skokie is very near and dear to my heart, in Skokie, Illinois? How can a small entrepreneurial restaurant or bar really establish a bar that they could be proud of as well?
Well, it's a nice segue into my business. So in 2008, I established a global beverage consulting firm designed to do just that. While I certainly cater to major corporations and multiple properties for those corporations, I also am happy to help out the small guy, because my personal philosophy is to kind of spread the word, and I'm an industry leader, and I want the small guy to be able to compete with these major corporations. So what you do is whether it's me or someone else, you hire a talented, up-and-coming young professional mixologist, somebody who has a background in flavor profiling, just like a chef, to create an original but tasty craft cocktail program. The natural byproduct of making great craft cocktails is you find yourself using, obviously, fresh ingredients and quality spirits, but you naturally find yourself using less alcohol per cocktail. You're not making it a weak cocktail, you're making it balanced, something we haven't seen in 80 years. And the result is that your liquor costs go down, your check averages go up as your guests can have a better experience and they're drinking more. So the bartender wins, the house wins, the guest wins. It's a win-win-win across the board, and they're cost-effective.
Amazing. That's fantastic. And I know that your company has been involved in consulting, as you mentioned, with many of the large companies, but certainly the bar in Edwardsville, Illinois, I believe that's where you mentioned, and so many other places. So Brian, you've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit. Any interesting places that you've been just sort of blown away beyond Edwardsville that perhaps as our listeners get out and they may be out and about for business travel, they may actually have a quality drink waiting for them at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, of course, if you're in New York City, I recently redesigned the Plaza Hotel, the Palm Court there. Always a great place to go for a cocktail when you're in New York City. But there's some great hidden speakeasies as well, like PDT, Employees Only, Death and Company, Clover Club. These are, because a quick Google. But certainly in Chicago, we're seeing that. There's so many great up-and-coming places. Around the world, I was really impressed with both Tokyo and Germany. Both of those countries, people are very fastidious and very detail-oriented. And so there's a lot of cutting-edge, really cool mixology going on. But really, it doesn't make a difference where you are in the world. In most European countries, most countries in the Asian Pacific Rim, and certainly in Australia, and even Latin America and South America are starting to get in tune with this whole, mixology culture. Really exciting time.
Very, very exciting time. So we have been chatting with the man that the Food Network has called America's Top Mixologist. You've written a book that has won awards as the best cocktail book in the world in 2009. So we've been chatting with Brian Van Flandern. Really fascinating subject, fascinating conversation, and I look forward to continuing to follow your. I know you've been on air quite a bit on the Food Network and other platforms, but Brian, I certainly would recommend our listeners get in touch with you if you're involved in the restaurant world. Brian works with large companies, with small companies. But Brian, you have a website. We're just about out of time. Yeah. I want to make sure our listeners can read a little bit more about you and your work.
Of course, the company's Creative Cocktail Consultants, and the website is mymixologist.com.
Well, that's what I call you, my mixologist.
Yeah.
There we go. Mymixologist.com. Check it out. Lots of great media appearances on the website. But again, check out Brian's website, mymixologist.com. Coming up after the break, we're going to continue our conversation about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. You won't want to miss it. You're listening to Get Down to Business, and we'll be right back.
According to the forecast,